We're now on the top of Daf Mem Gimel Amid Beis. Now, it was clear from the Mishnah that a woman is excluded, she's disqualified from Hazah. That's what we saw in the Mishnah at the end of Masechet Parah that was quoted here on Amid Beis. Hakol ksherim lahazos chutz mi, etc. Ha'isha. And it's also clear from this Mishnah that a katan qualifies for Hazah. V'lo polig, Rabbi Yehuda. We don't find in this Mishnah any mention of a dissenting view of Rabbi Yehuda. And a stam Mishnah that doesn't quote a dissenting view would imply that everybody agrees and it's unanimous. So we see here clearly that Rabbi Yehuda concedes that an Isha is excluded and disqualified from Hazah, but a katan is kosher. Amar Abaye, Abaye says no. Even though you don't find explicitly in the Mishnah the dissenting view of Rabbi Yehuda, we should still know that Rabbi Yehuda holds the opposite. He's machshir b'isha, and he passes a katan. Why? Came with the Omar Mar, since Ula said that kol parsha sheyesh ba mashma motzi miyad mashma, and mashma memela. That there are psukim where the second pasuk, the later pasuk, is coming lahotzi, levatel, that which we saw in the previous pasuk. And there are other psukim where the mashmos is both the same. The two psukim are, as we would say, ole b'kana echad. They are makayim, one or the other. And it means that any pasuk that comes to be interpreted to darshan in this parsha, then lo bolidrosh mimenu kimoshe darshim mea pasuk shalafanav. Now, if that be the case, lo haisa tricha Torah lashmienu drashan osefes ubelow drasha yinu omiv teshavu pasuk. In other words, if a later pasuk is repeating that which came in the previous pasuk, it's totally redundant, and therefore we have a push almost. We're almost compelled to assume that the second pasuk is coming lahotzi from the previous pasuk, and therefore, in the case of Rabbi Yehuda, he disagrees with the Chachamim, and when it says ish tahar, we cannot darshan in the way that it appeared in the previous pasuk, the pasuk right before it, because then the Torah didn't have to tell me again what we know from the previous pasuk. So Rabbi Yehuda, since he holds that in Kiddush, that which is mentioned right previously in the previous pasuk, the Torah included katan and excluded isha, and it goes without saying that in Hazah, which is the next pasuk, the Torah is coming to exclude and disqualify a katan, and larabos, and to qualify an isha. And basically, the bottom line is that Abai is saying there was no need for the Mishnah in Parah to mention the dissenting view of Rabbi Yehuda. It's just a Paul Yotze. It's a logical conclusion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now we go on to the next pasuk. This is pasuk Yites. So in 1919 in Bamidbar, Ehiza hatar ala tameh, and the Gemara darshans in the following way: Tar michlal shehu tameh. In other words, even though he's tar, it means he was tameh. The Gemara is interpreting tahar means now he's tahar because he left his state of tumah. But apparently, he didn't completely leave his state of tumah, because otherwise, why did the Torah have to indicate that now he became tar? So therefore, the Gemara darshans that he's tar, but he's not totally tar. He was tameh. He's in the process of tara. He's 90% of the way there, but he's not at the finish line yet. Limed al tful yom shekasher b'para. A tful yom who is almost tar because he already went to mikvah. He needs harev shemesh. He hasn't yet completed his tara, so he can't go into the mikdash yet. But nevertheless, as far as Parah is not in the Mikdash, it's out there on Har Zaysin, he's kosher. And this, by the way, is the bone of contention, and I think we've spoken about this, between the Tzdukim and the Prushim. And that's why the Prushim would deliberately be matame the Kohen as a Tful Yom, Lafuke, to exclude from the Tzdukim who said, no, we don't have this Kabbalah Bal Peh the way Torah Bal Peh that you have it. We insist that everything has to be 100% Torah. And that applies also with regard to the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Amar Rav Asi, ki havu be Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, be Para, Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan were learning together the Parsha of the Para. Lo maski mine. They couldn't come up with any consistent pattern in understanding this Parsha. Elakamai de Masek, halami be krava. He gives like an idiomatic phrase, like a fish. A fox coming out of a field that was already threshed, charisha. In other words, they couldn't come out with any new insight that would put the parsha in some sort of consistent perspective. Ela Amri, but they came to the same conclusion as Ula did, that there are some parts of the parsha which is mashma motzi miyad mashma, and there are other parts of the parsha which is mashma memel. Tani Tanakami de Rabbi Yochanan, and we're going to see that this is one of the rebbeim of Rabbi Yochanan, who is telling us in a brisa that kol hashchitos ksheis b'zar chutz mishal para, that the para requires shchita of a kohen, and a zar is disqualified. And Amalei Rabbi Yochanan puk tani livra, take this brisa, teach it outside the base medrash, don't let it in. It's one of the rare occasions that you'll find that Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with a Tana, and the reason is Shalom Atzinu Shchita B'Zar Psula. Rabbi Yochanan has an absolute rule: Shchita is not an avoda, and it doesn't require a kohen, and a zar is kosher. For Rabbi Yochanan, lo mi boy l'tana de lo tzayis. I don't have to tell you that he rejected the words of the Chacham who said that Shchita B'Zar is psula in the case of paraduma. El afil l'rabei tzayis. He didn't even accept his Rebbe's opinion on this issue. The Omer Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rav Shimon ben Yehud Tzadok. Shchitas para B'Zar psula v'ani omer kshera shalom atzinu shchita psula B'Zar. Very rare kind of case where Rabbi Yochanan takes such a strong opinion and he's not willing to, shall I say, tolerate another view. And now we go back to our Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Bolo Eitzel Para Shniya. So until now, we've been studying for almost a day and a half, a blot and a half, Paraduma. And this is somewhat typical of Daf Yomi, where you get a little bit of a taste of some major part of Shas. Taros is not included in Daf Yomi, so we really will not get an opportunity in the framework of Daf Yomi to cover Paraduma. So we got a little bit of a taste of it. I'm not saying we are experts now. We get smicha in Paraduma, but we got at least a little bit of a flavor for some of the principles, some of the issues, and some orientation. Maishna b'vidui rishon Dilo Omar. In the first vidui of the Kohen Gadol on his par, he does not recite Ubnei Aaron Am Kdoshecha. He says the words Aniu Basi. When he gets to the second round of vidui on his par, then he says Ubnei Aaron Am Kodshech. He adds to Aniu Basi, but Aniu Basi. But he doesn't have that addition on the first round. And not only that, the Gemara goes on to ask another question. Umayshna, why is it that Bevidui Sheni Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, right. So the Gemara answers, Tana de Bei Rabbi Shmuel, Kachi midas hadin no senes. Mutav sheyovo zakai v'yichaper al chayev el yovo chayev v'yichaper al chayev. In other words, when the Kohen Gadol is misvade on the first round for himself, now he has the status of he's included in kapara. Now that he is included in kapara, we can classify him, describe him as a zakai. He's got a clean record. Now he could go ahead and be mechaper for the Bnei Aaron HaKohen. Now, in our Mishnah becomes clear that with regard to the Seder of Shchitas HaPorah and Kabbalas Dama Yedei Kohen, we had also the Seder of Chatias Gecholim, Mizbeach HaChitzon for the purpose of the Aktoris HaKtoris and the Kodesh Kadoshim. And we mentioned that there are differences between Chatia Zu and Chatias HaGechol L'Ktoris. Right? So there are two Chatios. There's the first Chatia on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, and there's another Chatia which is part of the Ktoris. They were maktir the Ktoris on the Machta, where they did the Chatia. And there are distinctions between these two Chatios. Now, we're about to start the Mishnah here on Daf Mem Gimel Amid Beis, and we mentioned way back when we were learning on Daf Lamed Hey that the par was situated between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. We had a three-way Machlokas Tanoim exactly where that was, but it's a Tzafon. The Kohen Gadol did Smicha, then he was misfad his first Vidui, and then he had a second Vidui, as we saw in the Mishnah here on Daf Mem Aleph Amid Beis. Now the Mishnah is going to clarify the next part of the Avoda of this par, Shchato. Now the Kohen Gadol shechs the par, Kibel b'Mizrach. The Kohen Gadol himself will receive the dam in a Mizrach as damo, and he wouldn't immediately go into the Kodesh Kadoshim to do the Azaz Hadam on the Paroches and on the Mizbeach, but rather he would wait. What was he waiting for? First, he had to be makter the Ktores in the Kodesh Kadoshim. And therefore the Mishnah says, V'nosno l'mishahu, he's going to give over the Mizrach that has the dam of the par to another Kohen. Who is this Kohen? And what is his job? He was Memarisbo. He was constantly, nonstop, mixing the blood back and forth, shaking it up so that it wouldn't coagulate, because dam shenikrash is posel is rika. And where did this take place? Well, this Kohen was standing on a roved or a visha behechal, right? The ritzpah, the floor of the azara, was made with lines, shuros, with certain kinds of shayish, certain kinds of marble stones, and every one of those lines is called a roved. And this Kohen who's in charge of Memari Sasadam was standing on the fourth roved. And the reason why he was Mamaris the Dam, as we said before, is Kedei Shalo Yikrosh, to guarantee that the Dam shouldn't coagulate before the Azor. So there's a period of time now which is going to lapse when the Kohen Gadol is going Lifnai v'Lifnim for the Aktoris HaKtores, and there's a great fear that the Dam might coagulate, it might get hard. That's called Dam Korich. It won't be royal Izrika Azor. Now, after he's makabel the dam, then he is finished. Now he takes an interruption with the avodas hadam. He takes the gecholim from the outer Mizbech, the Mizbech HaChitzon, he goes into the Kodesh Kodashim to be machtir with these Yechalim, the Torres. And then he comes back to do the Azaz Dam Hapar, and this is derived from the Psukim, V'shachat es parachatos asher lo, v'lakach malo amachta gachle h me'al Mizbech l'fnei Hashem, u'malo chafnov Ktores samim daka, ve'evi v'beis laparoches, v'nasadas ha'kaporos ala h l'fnei Hashem, v'kisa anan ha'ktores es ha'kaporos, ha'shalei dutz v'lo yomus, v'lakach midam hapar, now he's ready to pick up the Dama Par, which was being held by that other Kohen on the Rovet Aravi, where he did the Mares, and Vehizo Betzvo Pnei Akapores Kedma Vilifnei Akapores Yazet Sheva Pam Min Adam Betzvo. So the Mishnah now clarifies the Seder, the exact sequence of taking the Gechalim from the Mizbeach HaChitzon for the purpose of the Aktoris in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Not al Machta, the Kohen took a pan. It was like a frying pan almost. It only had some defanos, and it was open on one side. Maybe it had 3 defanos, if you've seen the picture of it. And it's open on one side. Ola Bekevesh. Now he goes up the ramp of the Mizbeach on the southern side. The Rosh HaMizbeach. Now he gets onto the top of the Mizbeach. He gets the Maracha of Eish, and that is already on the western side of the Mizbeach. Upina, now he takes the Machta and he separates the Gechalim from this side, opening up, and to that side. Elif v'elif. And some of these Gechalim have not been burned totally. They're not total charcoal. There are some that already are completely burnt. And those are called omimos. And again, we're going to see later on, and this is also part of the piyut that we recite on Yom Kippur in the Avoda, that the omimos are not roy l'gecholim. So he needs some sort of a middle of the road. Again, this is sugyas that we'll learn later on in Masechet. Anyway, v'chote, he gathers together the gechalim in the machte, min hamukolos, hapnimios. So that if you have a log of wood that's burnt and it's consumed, and it no longer has a flame coming out of it, that's called gechalim meukolos. And these are also described with the adjective of gechalim pnimios. In other words, pnimios means they're close to the gag hamizbech, meaning they're below the surface, and they're in that middle stage that we indicated before. They're lochashos below omimos, means there's still some potential fire there. They're not completely dead. And then after he filled up his machta with these gechalim, yorad, he goes down from the mizbeach, v'nicha, and he places the machta, which is full of gechalim, hot gechalim, ala rovet arvisha bazara. As we said, this is the 4th shura on the Ritzvas Hazara. And the machta now is placed there until he's ready to bring the kaf full of a spoonful of ketores. Okay. Now it's interesting. I made a mistake. We're not really ready for the kaf yet because he's going to take a different machta, another pan, and he's going to dig it into the ketores. And then once he has the ketores in that second machta, then he's going to do what's called melo chafna, chafina. And he's going to scoop up the ketores and then place it into a kaf. So it starts in the machta, then it goes into his hands, and from his hands goes into the kaf. Later on, the Gemara is going to have al sugya. At what point does the ketores becomes sanctified the Kedushas Haguf? Is it when it's in his hands, when he puts in the Kli, in the Kaf? In any event, then he takes the Machta, which is full of Gecholim, that's hot Gecholim, that is on the Ritzpas Hazor, the Roved, and he takes that Machta in his right hand. In his left hand, he takes the Kaf with the Ketores, and he goes into Kodesh Kadoshim, and he pours the Ketores onto the Gecholim. And now the Mishnah is going to clarify what was the nature of the Machta that he used on the Mizbeach HaChitza when we said he separated the Gecholim, and we're going to now compare Chatias Gecholim during the entire year, which was done twice daily, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, to the Chatias Gecholim of Yom Kippur. Bechol Yom, the Mishnah says, during the entire balance of the year, the Kohen would chote the Gecholim from what's called the Marocha Shnia. There was a separate Maroch on the top of the Mizbeach for the Ketores, and the Machta which shel Kesef, it was made of silver. Uma'are v'sok shel Zav. After he was chote the Gecholim in a Machta of Kesef, then he would pour the Gecholim into another Machta which was made of gold. With this Machta of gold, he would enter into the Heichal, and he would be Maktir the Ketores on the Mizbeach HaPnim. So the original first Chitui was not going to be done with the Machta of Zav, because Zav can very easily get ruined. It's Nishchak v'Nechsar, and Chas Rachmona al Mamonim Shel Yisrael. I mean, it's a gold thing. By Yom. But now we get to Yom Kippurim. Choter b'shel Zahav. He will actually use the Machta of Zav to be choter the Gecholim on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, Uba, and with that very same Machta itself of gold, he would bring in these Gecholim into the Kodesh Kadosh, the Machta the Ketores. And the reason for this is because the weakness of the Kohen Gadol, he was fasting, and he had to do all the avodas single-handedly. Therefore, they were lenient, and they weren't matriach him to do an irui, to pour from one Machta in a second Machta, because that would require extra effort on his part. And even though we might say that gold will get somewhat rubbed off by virtue of the hot gecholim, but for one day of the year, we're not worried about it. Now we have another distinction. Bechol yom choter b'shel arbas kabim. So during the entire year, the Machta had a receptacle that could hold as much as 4 kabim, uma'ara l'toch shloshes kabim, and we poured from the first Machta, the Gecholim, into the second Machta. The second Machta had a volume, a max capacity volume of shlosha kabim. And the reason for this is, and this is something that you'll find, there's a Tosfos Yeshonim here on the bottom. He says, "Kedei shetia machta shnia sheba hayamachnis malea yofe v'kav echad hayamispazer al haaretz." So he wanted to beautify the machta, and he would take that extra kav, and it was spread out on the arts. And he says that this is based on Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, And the question is, what did they do with these gecholim, that extra kav that was poured on the oretz? That's what we're going to see in the sugya. Vayom on Yom Kippurim, however, in contrast, chote shlosha kavim, right? There's only one machta, and the machta will have that lower capacity of 3 kavim, uba, and which that machta is the kodesh kadosh. Rabbi Yossi Omer, b'chol yom chote b'shal sa'a. Now a sa'a is 6 kavim, umare b'toch shloshes kavim. So that the second machta is half the size of the first, according to Rabbi Yossi. And there are going to be 3 kavim that are going to be spread out on the oretz. Vayom, on Yom Kippur, says Rabbi Yossi, chote b'shlosha kavim uba hayamachta. So it's the same machta, and they use the machta of a smaller capacity. And that also might be a reflection of the weakness of the Kohen Gadol. B'chol yom haisa kveda, the machta that they used to be chotes hagecholim, and the machta that they used to bring into the heichal was a very thick and heavy machta, because again they didn't want to have to change it every so often, every month or so. So if it was thicker, it could tolerate the gecholim for a longer period of time without getting disintegrated. Vayom, but on Yom Kippurim, we don't want the Kohen Gadol to work very hard and have to carry a heavy machta. Therefore, kala. They made the machta out of very thin gold, so it wasn't so heavy. B'chol yom haisa yada ktsara. The handle of the machta was very small. It was less than an amma. Vayom on Yom Kippurim, in order to make it easy for him, it was arucha. It was 1.5 amos. Now, we're going to see later on that the reason why an arucha, a long handle on the machta, makes it easier for the Kohen Gadol is because then the Kohen Gadol could take the end of one end of the machta, of the handle of the machta, I should say, and tuck it under his armpit, which would help him carry it. B'chol yom haisa zehava yarok. The machta, which they used to bring in the gecholim, was a yarok color, a kind of a goldish color. And that was very common in those days. Today, we would say the word yarok is the same as tzahov, like from the word zahav. It's golden. In any event, that's the whole year round. Vayom on Yom Kippurim, Adam, the machta was reddish. That's an even more chashiv kind of a gold. Now, at this point, and this is a very long Mishnah. I don't know that we have enough time to finish the Mishnah. I'll just make a little bit more progress in the next 2 or 3 minutes. The Mishnah now adds 2 other distinctions between the Ketores of the rest of the year and the Ketores of Yom Kippurim. The Ketores was made of 11 different types of samimonim. B'chol yom makriv pras. Now, a pras is called a chatzi mona, otherwise known as 50 dinrei kesef. And that was b'shachris, and that's the haktorah that took place before the Evrei Atomid. And pras, another pras, which again is a half of a mona, bein arbain. After the Akrovas Atomid, shel bein arbain. And this is all based on the psukim, Viktiralov, Aaron, Ktores, Samim, Baboker, Beitivos, Aniros, Yaktirenu, Balos, Aaron, Aniros, Ben Arbayim, Yaktirenu, Ktores, Tamim, Tamid, Lufnei Hashem, okay. Vayom, on Yom Kippurim, in addition to the regular state Haktoros of every year, of every day of the year, I mean, that took place also on Yom Kippur, and in addition, Motzif, Milo Chafna, right? He had a scoop. He would scoop up with his hands from Shloshes Hamonim hayiserim, he was memale b'shtei yodov v'nichnas la'aktiram b'kodesh kadosh. So the premise here of the Mishnah is that there was extra Torahs because he was makriv a pras in the morning and a pras in the afternoon. And a pras, we said, was 50 dinrei kovza chatzi mona. 1 second.